it's Danielle Radojcin, and this is In Talks With, a series of bite-sized chats about culture from lockdown and beyond. Stefano Tonchi, welcome to the In Talks With podcast. We're talking to each other during the COVID-19 lockdown of 2020. I'm in London. Where are you?
I'm in New York State, actually in the countryside in Long Island, in Bridgehampton, where I have been recluded for the last 2 months. I think I moved here after the Paris shows the first week of March, and here we are 2 months later.
How are you feeling?
A little bit impatient to move back to New York, to kind of get back into a city that I love so much, and that is well known as the city that never sleeps, but I've been sleeping for 2 months.
You're one of the great lifestyle magazine editors, from launching Tea magazine for the New York Times in 2004 to the 9 years you spent at the helm of W magazine, and you've also worked at publications including Esquire and L'Uomo Vogue over the years. Today, of course, you're Global Chief Creative Officer at L'Officiel, which I think is working across 31 global editions. Looking back, what do you think it is about you and your background that led you down this path?
Well, I think I always looked at fashion as part of a larger discipline of journalism, and I always look at fashion in the context of contemporary culture, trying to find those connections and trying to celebrate them. I would say I never looked at clothes or at the clothes, but more at the meaning of them and their place in society and how they came to the meaning they have.
Magazines are a form of communication, you could say. What are your thoughts on how that has evolved? Thinking, of course, about the internet, but then also more recently to the COVID-19 pandemic and how that has affected things.
Well, I would say that the pandemic we are living through is just an acceleration of things that have been happening, at least in the last 5 years, at a very fast speed, but even 10 years ago. When I look back, really, I was thinking about this recently because I went through kind of my library and the many publications I've put out and the many things I've done, as you said. And I was thinking about, when I started, the world was a very different place. I'm talking about the 80s. I'm not talking about a small village in the middle of nowhere. I'm talking about Florence. But really, there were no internet, no cell phones, no e-commerce, all things that today are, almost like completely kind of embedded in our existence. I really to think about a time when to find a copy of your favorite publication, and for me was the Face magazine from London, I had to spend, multiple trips. I had to take multiple trips to the railway station at 4 a.m. in the morning to see and grab if the copy would have arrived, one copy, and grab that before anybody else. This was what life was, Music in Italy was so hard to put your hands on. There were no live concerts, they were forbidden. To get like a vinyl record, you have to go to London or to New York. There were no way to download music. There were no way to look at pictures of people in the clubs on the internet. The internet didn't exist. There were, it was such a different place. So communication magazine have completely changed their place in society. And we have been living through one of the most incredible revolution, I think, in the history of humanity. I mean, it's really something that probably is going to be remembered as more influential than the Industrial Revolution, because like the Industrial Revolution, it's really changing the nature of human beings, of what it means and how we communicate with each other, and what are our system of values.
You, of course, I wanted to mention you started your own independent magazine while you were still in Italy before you moved over to New York, called West Stuff.
Yeah, that was really the beginning of my, I would say, career in magazines. I did do something even earlier when I was still in high school with a couple of friends, something called Apache, that was really like a fanzine. But what is fun is that we kind of were going around to talking to the friends of my parents and this friend of mine, Nicola, to ask for their advertising pages that clearly they didn't have, because somebody was at this, I don't know, a small shop, somebody else had like was a car dealer. And then we asked them for money to support our enterprise, and we created advertising pages for them. And then we published like stories about, kind of movies that we have seen, in our kind of summer internship in England, or like records that we have kind of found, and fashion that we have seen. And this was, when we were like 17. So really, magazine has been my passion all my life, and still is today. And really, I think the quality, the content, the really the substance of magazine doesn't change. I think today we talk so much about digital as a substantive, while I think it is actually an objective. What I mean is that content is still content. Doesn't matter if it is delivered in a digital way.
That's really interesting. And of course, the ideas that you are known to work with within that are you're known for working at the intersection of fashion, art, and Hollywood. How did you arrive at that recipe?
Well, I mean, I would say I always have been following my interest and the interest of the people around me, and I would say the interest of my audience. Um, it started really connecting fashion style to music, because music was really like how we were kind of influencing. That's how it was the genre that was influencing people. We would dress in a certain way because we saw some musician doing it. I mean, all the British bands and the American bands, and you were like a hippie if you love a certain kind of West Coast music. You were like more dark if you like, the New York sounds of Lou Reed, and you were punk if you follow certain bands in London, and your clothes, the message came from music. And then, things evolved, I think, and the relationship with like Hollywood and like pop culture became much stronger. So we all fell in love very much with what was happening in movies. Movie stars really always dictate like some rules in fashion, in style, but they came to a real kind of um, full dominance in the last couple of decades, in particular because they multiply. Usually there were like few big movie stars, and suddenly, with TV and then influencers later, the cult of personality became much more diffuse. At the same time, I looked at contemporary art as sure one of my interests and something that also runs in my family, as my husband is an art dealer. And he introduced me to a lot of artists. But I also saw that as one of the very strong interests in the audience that I had at the New York Times and later at W Magazine. So, this connection of fashion with music, fashion with cinema, fashion with contemporary art, I think are kind of natural. I think fashion kind of feeds these other genre, and at the same time is kind of an expression of the dialogue with these other cultural forces. But I also really, in every job that I took, I also followed like the taste and the interest of the audience that I was, that my magazine had already.
And then at a time like this, when what you can do around film and art and fashion and all these things we've been talking about, how do you see that changing, or how can that recipe survive?
I believe that, it is so much part of human nature, dressing up and trying to be somebody else, wearing like somebody else's skin and expressing, yourself through the skin you put on, that are the clothes and the style that you create. This is not going to change. I don't believe that this pandemic will change the nature of, of people. I think still, there is, you have to dress in the morning, you have to and you sometimes you really dress for yourself. At least I do. Even these days of pandemic, it's not that I'm lounging in, a pair of underwear and and crazy hair. I do take care of myself because it's a form of talking to myself even. So I think that fashion and art and culture will always have like a place, and uh, I think that you know there are so many people right now that say, how can you be interested, or how can you give attention to stupid things like fashion, or superficial things like certain, I don't know, art or music or Hollywood and this and that, when there are people dying and there is like an epidemic, and we should all kind of only talk about basically the politics of this pandemic, because I'm very aware that this pandemic has very, very strong political and social meaning and hopefully consequences. But that doesn't mean that if there should be no fashion magazine, or that the fashion magazine should just show people in masks and protective gear. I mean, there are other outlets for that. Let's, fashion magazine, art magazine be, yes, an escape. I think it's right to have an escape. And I think also let them be a place for talks and reflection and fun. We need entertainment. I mean, it's part of our lives. It cannot just be about the political and social kind of commitment. That it is super important. Don't get me wrong. I totally agree on a political and social agenda. But I don't think that every magazine, and especially like, fashion publications with a long history, should disappear or become, a political agitator kind of propaganda. I mean, no, I don't believe that.
I'm so happy you said that you're still getting dressed and looking and getting dressed up and not just forgetting about fashion.
I mean, I think also we forget the industry and the work and and the reason why fashion is so important and relevant. um, I like to think about L'Officiel for a minute. That is like this very interesting brand that I start to discover. L'Officiel clearly has always been a service to the fashion industry. It was created in 100 years ago, in 1921, as l'Officiel de la Couture et de la Mode in Paris, to promote, the fashion industry in the French fashion industry, and talk about it in the world. I mean, today I think still the magazine function is to promote the world of fashion and a service to the fashion industry. Absolutely. There are no other kind of political, social agendas. But, this is also a publication that survived through even the Nazi occupation of Paris because it was taking care of the fashion industry and making sure that people of every social background had a job if they were working in the fashion industry, and those seamstresses, could support, and get food for their kids. I mean, in that way, was it superficial for a magazine to publish fashion during the war and or what was happening? Maybe, yes, it was superficial, but it was also incredibly socially relevant. It was very economically relevant. And at the end, it was also giving, I don't know, a sense of hope and a sense of beauty that I think it's part of the human nature and should be part of the human nature. I think, to look at what is happening today and the pandemic and the at this point, million of people that are dying from these is it's hard enough. Sometimes you want to have a place where to escape for 5 minutes or half hour and imagine life in a different way.
And you recently said that there's incredible potential in the digital and social space, but so much to be done.
Can you talk a bit about what you mean by that?
Some people that come from my background and print and the old school have become kind of uh, very negative on digital culture and digital uh, magazines and what you see on Instagram or what you see social channel, a lot of what you see on YouTube and where the numbers are. But I don't think that digital culture is by I think it's fantastic. It's fantastic that everybody can access it. I think it's fantastic that it's so much easier to communicate and to find an audience actually, even when it's a small audience. The thing is that sometimes we just give too much attention to the numbers and to what make those numbers, and a world of numbers. And so you identify digital only with, basically bad content or popular content, when, digital is just like a way to deliver content. It's not a definition of the content. It is the way we deliver content. We can still deliver great content in the digital way. Actually, we can find a larger audience for it, more kind of small niches that have special interest. I really, really think that, I recently I joined Instagram, and you can check that. And I'm really like, not I'm using my Instagram is called Open Book, and I'm just like posting images from articles, magazines, books that I have edited or published, and I try to talk and present those images. There is nothing, I would say, superficial about it. I think it's great content, but it is delivered, I think, in a modern way through Instagram. The same way, I find so many interesting publications that are just digital. That doesn't define the quality of the content.
Why did you choose the name Open Book?
Well, it's really like literal, because it's always about, we in my world, we often call magazine books. And it's really like, the double page from a book that is open in front of me, a magazine or a proper book. So, and sometimes you say you can read me like an open book. So it's also, I say, a way to expose, what I'm thinking at that moment. It was the birthday of Queen Elizabeth, and I post something that was from a book, where there was this great collage, a book called Excess, that was the catalog for an exhibition in Florence about the 80s and the kind of punk years, and it was fun. Was a really it was a way to remember something and say, oh, this is what I'm thinking right now. The same way, another day I was thinking about, what will happen to luxury with all these crazy things that are happening, and I posted this picture that was published in an art issue in W, of some very beautiful fur on a chair in the middle of the ocean. I mean, where the waves are going to take them away. That was a way to say, well, think, it's kind of the idea of luxury, and a certain kind of luxury, what fur are, it's really in danger. Possibly there is a beauty in it too.
Stefano, we're coming to the end of our conversation, but I was wondering before you go, has this period of lockdown been inspiring for you in any way, in that it's given you any new ideas?
Well, I mean, it's been a very, very active period, actually, because I could focus staying at home. Uh, I work, as you can see, on this new idea for Instagram, because I really happen to kind of to put order in all the magazines and books and things that I have done. So it gave me a little bit of a perspective, trying to understand which are the interests that have been constant in my career. And I would say really what we started with is interest in fashion as part of contemporary culture, in continuous dialogue with music, with contemporary art, with cinema, with television, and how each one of these kind of disciplines takes inspiration and feeds into each other. I love that. I think this is very much, the moment we live in, and I feel that's the expression of it. On the other side, I spent a lot of time also trying to know better the brand that I start working for, the L'Officiel Group, looking at really literally 100 years of publishing. That is quite incredible when you have had access to the whole um, archives that, thank God, is digitalized and was accessible for me. So you can see really the evolution of a magazine about fashion as an evolution really of really fashion culture, evolution of the place of women in society, really like a history of women, a history of the of liberation of women from the corset to like the freedom of Chanel and today, and then also the representation of fashion, because the first 10 years are all about illustration and drawings, and then you have the first pictures, and then you have the coming of fashion photography, and then in the most recent year, the coming of videos and other new form of technology. It's quite incredible. Um, and then, another part of the brand that I kind of appreciate was that from really its inception in 1921, the magazine was in English, French, and Spanish. So immediately it was an international brand. So when I had to deal with I took as a serious commitment to meet the 30 editor in chief of each of the edition and know the publishers and get to know what they're doing, how they're doing it, and create like a conversation between them that never existed. So I put together this kind of new network where I have, this morning I was just like dealing with the South American group. So it was like Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina. And I had like the editor in chief and some of the digital editor from this magazine, and we're exchanging ideas. A lot of countries, by the way, are still, or they've been in lockdown, they're just coming out. Everybody's dealing with the same issues. How are we going to publish next issue? Is it going to be just digital? And if it is digital, what kind of delivery I'm going to have? Maybe little bits of it, maybe all together. Maybe I want to create something that is interactive, like they're doing in Latvia. Maybe I'm going to do something very different, like they're doing in China. That is, L'Officiel is a weekly feed on your phone, and from the issue you can shop directly. This is very Chinese and very, very like evolved. But exchanging this experience is so interesting, and I think it's about kind of in a certain way building the future, and the future of magazines, not as we knew them, but the way we will know them, because I'm sure the idea of magazine will survive.
Well, that's a very nice, positive, forward-thinking note to end on. Stefano, thank you so much for joining me on the In Talks With podcast.
Thank you for having me, and hopefully we will be all out and about having fun very soon. Hopefully, shopping for good causes, and I would say going back to what we were, but better than what we were.
You've been listening to In Talks with me, Danielle Radojcin. The sound and theme music were by Wargie Productions, and the artwork is by Patrick Waugh. If you enjoyed this episode, please pass it on to someone who you think might also like it. And of course, please do subscribe and leave a review. Thanks for listening.